Everybody, welcome back to episode 10 of Fitness and Money, Maximizing Your Health and Wealth. Glad you're able to join us. This week, we're going to start the first in a three-part series of arms, and specifically triceps. Now, just as a little bit of a recap, when we started out, we decided we were going to go from the kind of the neck down, working largest muscle groups and then getting to smaller ones, and then legs, of course, is a totally different thing. We're going to get to that, obviously, a lot of work to do there. So started with the back, did the chest, did the shoulders. Those are large muscle groups. They involve smaller muscle groups like your biceps and triceps. If you remember me saying, when you work your back, you're working your biceps, although we try to minimize that. And when you're working your chest, you work your triceps, and we're trying to minimize that. So now we want to work the triceps and the biceps. We're going to have three exercises that we're going to do for triceps. Whether you're interested in building some size or whether you're interested in just getting more shapely, more toned, defined arms, the exercises that I'm going to show you here, even though they are isolation exercises, done correctly, again, I'm going to keep hitting on form, done correctly, you'll be able to build size if you want, or if you just want more shapely arms and more defined arms, you can get that as well. So the first exercise that we're going to do today for arms, and oh, by the way, it's interesting when you go into a gym, you always see most people working their arms. People are doing curls, people are doing all different kinds of tricep exercises, and they're really small muscles, and I see a lot of people doing many sets and repetitions. The tricep and the bicep, comparatively to the other muscles in your body, are very small. They don't need a ton of work to get stimulated. They call triceps, for a specific reason, they're called triceps, and biceps being two, triceps being three heads of the different muscles, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But the first exercise that we're going to do is tricep dumbbell extensions. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can do these. If you're in a gym, you can use a barbell. You can use this thing called an easy curl bar. Some of you may know what that is, but we're going to keep with the theme of using dumbbells and or bands or kettlebells or straps. And we're going to do that following sequence, because quite honestly, I think you get just as good a workout with dumbbells as you do with any other pieces of equipment. I'm kind of proving that to myself over the past, year and a half, like I told you in the beginning, kind of since COVID. Still working out at home, still working out in the basement, and still making great gains and optimizing my weight and all that stuff. And you guys will be able to do the same. So let's get into that first exercise, which again is going to be dumbbell lying extensions. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, got our bench here. First thing we want to do is get in that position that we normally are in here. The dumbbells are here at the end of the bench. We're going to grab those dumbbells, and again, you can either keep your feet planted on the ground, or you can put your feet up on the bench. Because I've been doing exercises for so long on a bench, I just happen to feel more comfortable up here on the bench, so I'm going to put them up on the bench, but you do not have to do that. So as usual, I'm going to go through the incorrect way to do these, and then I'm going to go through the correct way. And I keep harping on form, but form's going to make all the difference with these exercises in terms of the kind of benefit you're going to get from them using form. So doing this exercise incorrectly, either way, you're going to have to bring the weights up from here. So you bring them up. Right now, my elbows are locked. You can see that they're pretty much locked out. So doing it incorrectly, my elbows are locked, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to go back up. Do it one more time. Down and back up. This is incorrect for a couple of reasons. Generally, we don't like to lock out our elbows. Number one, could cause injury. Number two, it takes the pressure off of the muscle, putting it in a static position. And when you do the exercise wrong and right, you'll be able to notice that you're keeping more stress, good stress, on the muscle if it's not in a static, locked out position. The other thing that was incorrect about this was we don't want our arms to move. We don't want this part of our arm to come back like this. So no movement, that's incorrect. Locking out, incorrect. So where we want to start doing it correctly, we want to start about here. And you notice that my elbows are no longer in that static, locked out position. Okay? That's what we want. We also do not want this part of the arm to move around. We want to keep that kind of stationary as much as we can. So I'm going to come down, and I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to come down, and I'm going to come back up. One more time, down to about the shoulders, and come back up. Again, down to the shoulders, and come back up. So again, what we're trying to do is we are trying to not lock out the elbow, as opposed to this. We want to do this at the beginning of the movement, and then as opposed to this, we want to do this. That's perfect. You're keeping good stress on the tricep muscle, and you're not moving this. The more that you move this, you start involving other muscles, and you definitely do not want to do that. So, alrighty. So we talked about the triceps. There are three distinctly different heads to the tricep. You have a head here, you have a large head back here, and a smaller head back here. So if we look at it this way, you can see this particular head of the tricep. You can see this particular medial head of the tricep here. And then you can also see right down here that third head of the tricep. That head is very difficult to develop. The exercise that we're going to do, next week is going to be one that works that specific head. So if we're looking for bigger or more shapely arms, we're going to be able to do it with these three specific exercises that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. So that's a wrap for the exercise portion. So let's get into a few things about, we've been talking about mutual funds, and we've been talking about stocks, and we've been talking about 401ks and Roths and IRAs and, different type things like that. What I'd like to talk about now is at different points in your life, the kind of mix that you might want to have with mutual funds. Mutual funds tend to, your employer tends to give you an option with mutual funds and stocks. And it's going to be a wide array of either large capitalization companies, smaller companies. Some even let you get into commodities like oil and gold and silver. Some let you get into what are called REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. So there's a whole bunch of things that your employer, depending on who it is and how many offerings they have, um, they'll let you get into those things. So if you're someone who is in your 20s, I'm going to say, in my humble opinion, that you should be 100% invested in stocks in your retirement fund, because you are young enough and you have so many years of, of time left that when stocks go up and they go down and up and down, in the long run, you're going to come out ahead with more investable returns if you're invested in stocks. Again, stocks return about 9%, maybe 10% a year over the long haul, and that's really, really hard to beat with other investment vehicles. Now, as you start aging into your 40s and into your 50s, now you've kind of got to start thinking about, do I really want to take all that risk with stocks? Most people will usually, when they're in their 40s or 50s, most investment advisors will start paring back your stock exposure and start getting into other things like bonds and getting into cash or cash equivalents. Now, there's many, many different kinds of bonds. There's U.S. Treasury bonds, there's corporate bonds, there's high yield bonds, there's municipal bonds. We're going to get into each of those things and what the differences are, but for the sake of this conversation, bonds is going to come up at some point when you're in your 40s and 50s. The other thing, again, that's going to come up is cash or cash equivalents. Now, cash does not mean money sitting under your bed in your mattress, because that's not an investment. That's losing money. And the reason that cash is losing money is that, as we all well know and we've lived through over the past year or better, inflation erodes your purchasing power. So if you have $1,000 sitting in your mattress today, that $1,000 is not going to buy the same amount of goods in a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, as it does today. And that's simply because of inflation. So you're actually losing money when you think that you've got it safe under your mattress, so to speak. Luckily, what happens when inflation rises is that banks and brokerage houses like Schwab or Vanguard or Fidelity, they start paying more money for cash deposits. And those can be paid in the form of money market funds. We maybe all heard of money market funds. You can either have money sitting in your checking account, your savings account, and if you want to put it in a money market account, you can put it in that. Now, until inflation hit over the past decade, you were probably getting close of a return as what you were getting with the money under your mattress. It was probably 0.10%, certainly maybe would have gotten to 1%. But again, that's not really investing your money, so to speak. That's kind of losing money because of what inflation does to the erosion of your purchasing power. However, cash and cash equivalents now, because inflation is high, they're paying probably 4%, 4.5%, maybe even 5% for money market funds. That's great. We haven't seen that in many, many years. So keeping money in cash does actually mean something now. You can also put money in CDs. Now, CDs is where you lock up your money for a specific period of time, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. Now, the longer that you lock up that money in a certificate of deposit, a CD, the more interest that they're going to pay you. But even right now, if you were to lock your money up for, say, a year or 14 months, 15 months, you can probably get, again, 4.5%, 5% on that CD, maybe even more if you can choose to lock it up for more time. But I'll be honest with you, right now, money market funds are paying pretty much the equivalent of what some CDs are paying. So that's worth knowing. So let's say we're getting into our 40s and 50s. Maybe because we don't have as much time left as we would have when we were in our 20s, we want to pare back our stock exposure to maybe 80% of our total portfolio, meaning 20% would go into either bonds, CDs, or money market funds. Now, as we get older, the advisors are going to tell you that you need to continue to increase your bond and cash equivalent exposure and pare back your stock exposure. I totally understand that. When you're older and you're getting near retirement and you're going to perhaps need that money to live on, you certainly can't afford to lose a ton of money. As you get older, you're kind of shifting your needs toward capital preservation instead of the growth of your money. So that being said, as you start getting into your 60s and you can actually start taking, actually at 59 and a half, you can start taking money from your 401ks, 403bs, 457s, IRAs. You can start, if you need, to take money from those accounts. Now, keep in mind that when you take money from those accounts, you're obviously reducing your balance. And if you happen to have a down market, that's a double whammy, because not only has the stock market gone down, but you're taking money out of your account as well. So to try to blunt the effect of that, that's when the bonds and the cash come in, because they're much more stable and not subject to a lot of the volatility of the stock market. Now, that being said, I'm going to tell you that people underestimate that if you retire if you're lucky enough to retire in your 50s, or if you retire when you're 60 or your early 60s, you may have 20 to 25 years left of life. So you don't want to be too conservative and cut back everything, because if you start going to cash and cash equivalents and bonds, when the markets have those great times when they return 10%, 12%, 15, 20% a year, you're going to be sitting in cash equivalents and bonds that are probably going to be getting you no more than that 4 or 5% interest. And again, depending on what the inflation rate, that may keep up with inflation. Maybe it'll outpace inflation by a couple of percent, but you're certainly going to miss those big moves in the stock market that are really going to ratchet up your portfolio value. So it is a tough balancing act, and we're going to discuss that more in the next video. But overall, I guess to summarize is, if you're young, take the risk. You got a lot of time to recover with your stocks and in the stock market. So I'm saying that pretty much most of your capital should be invested in the stock market when you're in your 20s and 30s. As you approach your 40s and 50s, again, that's where maybe we want to relook at the portfolio and maybe get a little bit more conservative with the stocks. Maybe we want to get some bond exposure, some cash equivalents exposure. And as we start getting into our 50s and approaching 60, that's when we want to perhaps cut back a little more. But remember, we never want to completely cut out the stock exposure, because then you're missing the potential upside in those markets. And we will have those years. 2022 was terrible. 2023 is pretty much flat so far. But we are going to have those years where the stock market's going to go up, 12, 15, 20, 25%. We want to make sure we have stock exposure so that we can capture that upside when that does happen. So that's a wrap for today. Appreciate you tuning in. We're going to be back. We're going to cover the second exercise with triceps, which is something going to be called tricep kickbacks. And everybody's going to get a laugh when we do these tricep kickbacks. I know that When I was in the gym and I was doing tricep kickbacks, I'd get a lot of smirks from a lot of the people in the gym being like, well, what's that exercise going to do? And I'm telling you right now, it's one of the most beneficial exercises. And when you do it right, it's going to develop that third head of the tricep, which again, outer, back, and this little area here, which is makes up the tricep. That area will get developed with the tricep kickback. So again, appreciate it, everybody tuning in, and until next time, have a great day.